Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in. Today I want to take some time to show you a Android app that I've built. This is a class project in reference to Coursera. Taking my first class, so pretty excited about it, and I want to get this out there and show you guys what I've done. So this project that I did is called Modern Art UI. So I'm just going to do a quick demo, and then I'll show you the code on how I wrote it. Alright, so when we dive in first here, we see a bunch of 5 different blocks of color, and I've got this little slider bar down here. So this seek bar, or slider bar, whatever you want to call it, as you scroll to the right, it changes the color of all the blocks that are color. So as you can see, the white block up here in the top left never changes color. So that's what we want. There's a couple other small things. This overflow menu in the top right, when you click on it, it gives you more information. If you click, you can learn more about the art and how it was inspired. So if you click Not Now, it cancels out the dialogue. But if you click Visit MOMA, that's the website, and it'll actually bring up a chooser, so you can choose which app you want to open the website with. However, I just told mine not to ask me anymore. So you can see this is the mobile website for the MoMA. And we go back, and we're back to my slider. Okay, so pretty simple. So now I'll dive into the code to show you guys how I did it. So we'll start off with the Android manifest file, and as you can see, I only have one activity here, so that was all that was needed for this app. And the name is main activity. The intent filter is going to be main, and the category is going to respond to the launcher. So this is the first intent that runs. So let's go ahead and dive into that class, the main activity class. And as we start off here, you see I have some imports for various things. I'll just start off with the class. It extends action bar activity and implements seek bar to on change. I'll get into that later. The extends action bar activity essentially gives me the functions to handle my menu that I did in the top of the app, and the seek bar on change listener, that gives me the functions to handle when I scroll the seek bar left or right. So starting off here, I've instantiated a few variables. The first row is instantiating all my image views, and that's what those blocks of color are. If you remember, there was 5 blocks of color. Those are each an image view. So if I pull up my app here, you can see I have a white, some sort of purple, pinkish, green, blue, and red. Those are all image views. So I go ahead and store 5 image views, and also I'm going to store the URL for the website. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to store a title for my chooser box. So we call the onCreate method. First thing it does is after it sets the super, it's going to set the content view to this activity main and resource that I built. So let's go ahead and dive into that, and I'll show you. This is the main view of what you're seeing. So as you can see here in the top right, it starts out with a relative view that sort of encompasses everyone, and then we dive into a linear layout which also encompasses everyone. You can see that this is a vertical linear layout, so every time I added something new, it's going to be in rows. So the first guy is going to be the top row, which is this linear layout. The second guy is going to be the second row, and then my seek bar, I was able to kind of sit right on top of that second linear layout. So one thing I want to mention about this top level linear layout is the weight sum is 10. So that'll come in later when I start describing these other linear layouts. So let's talk about my first horizontal linear layout, which is my image views. My first row of image views, I set the layout weight of 5, which means I want it to have half of the weight. You remember, right, that this has a weight sum of 10. So if I give half or 5 of that to the first linear layout, then it's going to have half the screen, essentially, or half of the parent linear layout. So I made it a horizontal because I wanted my image views to be side by side. And as we scroll down here, you'll see that I did give it a weight sum of 3. So essentially, you can see I have 3 blocks in here, and if you can guess, I gave them all weights of 1. So I'll go ahead and dive into each image view, and you'll see that I initted it with a background, gave it an ID, and I gave it a weight of 1. And it's going to be similar across the board. So linear layout 2 is going to be very similar. I gave it a little bit different weight sum of 5, and that's because I wanted to make this left block bigger. So I wanted to make the left block 3 and the right block 2. And also I gave this one a layout weight of 5 so that it would take up half the screen. So click here, you can see I have a background and a layout weight of 2, and then ID. And then the last thing that I did was this little seek bar guy. Essentially I just filled the width and let the height be whatever it wanted to be. And then I did set the alpha and the background, so essentially I made it a black background so you could see it, but then I also wanted you to see the blocks behind it, so I made it half transparent so you could see through it. So that was kind of a cool thing. The last thing I did on the seek bar was I made the maximum 255, and the reasoning for that is whenever you're setting colors, I used the red, green, blue method, or the RGB method, and for the RGB, it requires a number between 0 and 255, so that's why I made my maximum 255. So that's all there is to this XML file. I'm going to go back to the main activity and keep going here. So I find my seek bar and store it in a variable, and then I set the listener to this activity for that seek bar. I instantiate my image views. Notice that I didn't instantiate image 1. The reason for that is that we don't need to change image 1. It's a white block and we don't change the white blocks. Then I go ahead and set the initial backgrounds. And I want to note that wherever I put 0 is where I'm going to allow the seek bar to take over later on. And that's why I made it 0, because initially the seek bar is instantiated at 0. Alright, so going down, on Create Options menu, this is a function that comes from extending action bar, and it allows me to control what happens when I click that overflow in the top right. So on Create Options menu, I'm going to inflate my menu main resource, and I'll dive into that quick. So you can see I have my menu tag, and I simply just put one item in there, and I set it to never show because I always want it to be in the overflow, and then I just gave it a quick ID of more info. So that's a simple little menu. And then this function also comes from the action bar activity extend. And what we do here is I go ahead and check if the ID is more info, and that is set up here in my menu XML file. I don't really need to do this check since there's only one item in the menu, but I go ahead and do it anyway because it's good practice, I think. I go ahead and set up a builder to build my dialog box. I give it this context, I set the message, and I set the title. Then I go down here and I set my positive action. So the positive action is going to be when you visit the MoMA website, and then the negative action is down here. It's when you click the Not Now. So as you can see here, I set up a web intent on the action view to parse the URL that I set up earlier. And if you don't remember, this URL that I set up right here is going to be the MoMA website. Then I set up a chooser intent so that you can choose which web application you want to open this intent with. And then I go ahead and fire off the activity. So the negative action will just show you a not now string, which I set up in my string file. And then when you click it, it's going to cancel. So I'll go over my string file probably last, just to give you guys an idea of how I set it up. So then I create my dialog based on that builder, and I show it. Okay, so on progress changed, this has to do with the seek bar, and this comes from the implements on seek bar change listener. So on progress changed, I do have this log function here, but I was simply using that to test my seek bar and see making sure the progress was putting out what I thought it was going to put out. And as you can see here, I skipped over image 1 because we don't actually need to change image 1 because it's a white block. And then if you remember from earlier where the zeros were, I put the progress variable that we get passed in from this in each of those. And I kind of did them in a different fashion. So I'll go ahead and explain how this color.argb works. Essentially, it creates a color from, and this is alpha, red, green, and blue. So my alpha I always set as the highest number, which means that you can't see through it, so it's not transparent. And then each of these three numbers, the red, green, blue, all go from 0 to 255, 0 being the least and 255 being the greatest. So as you can see, this has 255 as the G variable, which means it has full green, essentially. So in this one I change green, in this one I change the red, in this one I change green and blue, and in this one I do a smaller change of red and green. So I was just testing out different progress placements. And then these last two that I didn't do anything with. So that's pretty much the whole app. Let me make sure I went over everything, and I want to show you guys the strings XML. These are just my resources that I use. So we've got a title, more information, a menu item, the dialog message, dialog title, the button messages. Alright, so we went over Android Manifest, show you how I launched my initial class. We went over main activity to show you all the code that goes in behind this. We went through my activity main, which is where I set up all my image views and my seek bar. And we went over my menu main. So I think that's pretty much it. Thanks again for tuning in, and hopefully bringing some more awesome projects in the future. So thanks.